This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you've had a fantastic week so far. You're joining me back on the Twilight show on Tuesday. I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Jawad Lawara, who I shall introduce shortly, but we'll be talking about the merits of both private and state schools, about just education in general at the moment, really. So that's all to come on the show, Tuesday Twilight show with me.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
I was trying to do one of those fancy kind of fade downs with the sound, but it wasn't going to play ball. I was too clumsy with my fingers. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all good and are ready for another show with me, Ben Thomas, as your host. We're going to be live for the next hour and a half or so, give or take, with a little bit of news in between. And I'm joined today by someone who is a very, very good friend of mine. Known him for a number of years. Luckily for me, sadly for him. But he's also a teacher. How good is that? So it was high time that I got him on the show to talk all things private education. The coin. So hopefully he is available and ready. I can see him popping up on my screen. Jawad, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. You?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, how's your day been?
It's been full of rehearsals for a performance on Thursday. So
a performance? What kind of performance?
We are doing The Wizard of Oz.
Is it big budget?
It is quite a big budget, actually, yeah. When we get on to talking about the difference between state and an independent school, yeah, the budget's a little bit bigger.
Well, there we go. We've already got a bit of an insight into what we're going to talk about. We're gonna kind of just, I kind of, a little bit like my mum last week, I kind of sent him sort of a rough agenda of what we're going to talk about. But anyone who's listened to my show, you know that I tend to go off on a bit of a tangent, depending on what my famous guests or semi-famous guests talk about. So we'll have a little chat about the kind of key differences really, and for people that have not been on kind of both sides of the fence, that there is, that there are quite a lot of differences. For me personally, I've always been in state schools. It's just a kind of a decision that I've made and kind of where the jobs have been really. But, Jawad, as he'll talk about in a minute, kind of has had quite a long career so far. Still going, by all accounts, still going. And, he'll be able to give us a bit more information about the differences really. But, there's so much in the media at the moment about budgets, about lack of money. We talk a very small amount about, some of the unrest that's going on in schools up and down the country later on. But, Jawad, in terms of your experiences, can you give us kind of a rough overview of where you've been, what you've been doing, and kind of how you've ended up sort of where you are now, really?
Yeah, it scares me a little bit when you say it's been a long career. That makes me feel old. But yeah, when you think I've been teaching 17 and a half years now. So yeah, a long time. So I started in a state school, actually the primary school that I went to as a pupil, and ended up working with some of the staff or all of the staff that taught me when I was in junior school. And I stayed at the same school for almost 10 years, I think it was, and kind of got to a point in that job where I'd gone as far as I was going to get, and I needed a change. I needed just a way out. You can get a bit too comfortable at times, I think. So
was that because of just to jump in there, was that because of the lack of career progression in that particular school, or was it just that you literally gone, I'm done now, I've had enough?
A bit of both, really. The head teacher changed, and obviously that changes the whole dynamics of a school. And it wasn't anything personal about the head teacher. She was lovely, has done a really good job there. But I just got to a point where where I'd been at that school for 4 years as a pupil. I had been there on my teaching practice, and then 10 years as a teacher. That's quite a big chunk of my life in one place, in one building. So our former deputy head had taken a headship at a school. So I went and did a 2-term maternity cover with her in year 6 as kind of an easy way out. So that's where I went to next.
I think it's always quite good. It goes back to one of those things where it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And I've spoken to you before about it, but I touched upon it a little bit last week. And there was a school that I was at kind of after our twins were born, and I was basically just bombed out. Just like I think the head there had gone. I'm not seeing what I need from you. I kind of felt that I wasn't really getting what I needed from the school, and kind of had like say throw my toys out the pram, but I kind of ended up leaving mid-year and moving to kind of the schools cluster of where I'm now, really. But did you, in terms of kind of that situation and when you did that maternity cover, was that quite tricky for you to kind of slot in to a different school? Obviously you said you had connections there, but was it a bit of a challenge at that point?
It was mid-year as well, actually. So I joined in January, so had that challenge as well. So the head had been the deputy head where I worked first of all, and she probably left about 4 years after I joined. So she had been at that school quite a while, and then her deputy had been a teacher at the same school as me as well, and had moved there to do a deputy maternity cover. So I knew the head and deputy really, really well. They were really good friends. So I never felt kind of uncomfortable with it. It wasn't difficult to fit in. The staff were great. It was a 3-form entry school. I was working in a 2-form entry school before. So that was a change. And it was in a strange area with a real mix of kind of pupil demographics, some from relatively wealthy backgrounds, some from quite deprived areas. So that was a challenge, but I really enjoyed it, actually.
And you had you obviously got 2 fantastic children, haven't you? And kind of in terms of your fantastic sometimes anyway, as we all feel as dads. But like in terms of where they kind of arrived, were you still in kind of state education at that point, or had you made the move to private school by then?
I had made the move to private school a couple of years before they came along.
So how did that? So obviously going from a state school to a private school, my understanding is it's not a huge jump particularly, but for example, if I'm keeping an eye on jobs that are going on around me, and I'm not, if my head teacher is listening or anyone from my school is listening, unfortunately for you, I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. But the jobs that I see are all connected to state schools. So how did you? First of all, how did you find the job? And secondly, what was the process, in terms of kind of interviewing for that and kind of making the transition over to private education?
So after the 2-term maternity job, obviously halfway through that, I knew I had to start looking for a job. So I actually moved to another state school and accepted a job. And over the summer holidays, before I started this job, again, an ex-colleague who works at the independent school that I'm at now messaged me and said, there's a year 6 job going here. You should apply. And I was like, I've just taken a job in another school. Kind of, it's just the wrong time. If it had been 2 months earlier, it would have been fine. So I started at this other school, and within about 2 days, I knew that it wasn't the school for me. And I think
it's crazy how quickly that happens, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
you just know, like almost you kind of you almost get by with the the tour and meeting the staff and stuff, and the kids are great, and then you go, actually, you know what, I've accepted the job, and there's just that feeling. And obviously 2 days is pretty big, isn't it?
I would probably argue it was more like 1 day, because on the first day in year 6, I went in and they said, yeah, we give the year 6s a spelling test. And I was like, okay, first day back after summer, fine. And it was all the year 5 and 6 statutory words. I think it was about 120 word spelling test on the first day back after the summer. Hello, can you hear me still? I'm not sure. So we did the spelling test, and I can remember the children saying, "Oh, we nearly finished." And I was like, we've still got 60 words left to do. And I can remember the groans from the children. And I was like, if this is what I'm going to be forced to do and how I'm going to treat this class, then it's not the school for me. So got in touch with the independent school and said, actually, I'll come for an interview. And obviously, maybe not the most professional thing to do, but having only been there about a week, I had to go for an interview. So had to tell a few white lies to get out. So came for the interview, and about 2 days after the interview, got a phone call to say that I'd got the job to start in the January. So it wasn't the greatest thing I've ever done, but for my own personal sanity and well-being, I just thought I don't think I can stay at this school any longer. So I had to hand in my notice about 4 weeks after starting.
But do you know what I think?
The most awkward conversation I've ever had with anybody, and I can remember the conversation with the head teacher so clearly. And she said, "Have you had an interview?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she obviously worked out then it was the day that I'd phoned in sick, and yeah, it didn't go down very well. And I completely get that, but actually, I'm not a selfish person, and it was maybe the first time in my life that I'd really thought about what I needed to do for my own well-being and happiness.
For the family as well, I guess. I mean, do you know what? I've been on both sides of that, and I think it is best for everyone if you're kind of upfront with it. And I don't, what you've described to me. Yeah, of course, it's not. If you were going to pick a kind of a recruitment handbook, that wouldn't be in there. But in terms of you having that conversation, saying, "Look, I'm a month into this job, and I know it's not going to be for me," sort of thing. And once you know you're leaving, it changes your mindset a bit. I think you kind of relax a little bit, or I have in those situations, and kind of you drop your guard down a little bit, I guess.
It's funny because I built a really great relationship with the pupils. The class were absolutely wonderful. Got on really well with the staff, considering I was only there for a term. I'm still in touch with 2 or 3 of them now as well and see them regularly. So it wasn't the school as a whole, it was just maybe the way the school was run and the kind of the SATs, the complete SATs focus just didn't sit well with me.
And just for context, give us the year that was in terms of you joining that school and the SATs focus and everything else. What year was that?
2016 it must have been.
Okay, so spoiler alert, it's not got any better.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's we're going to talk about it in a bit more detail, and obviously that is one of the key. From my understanding of it, is one of the key differences, and obviously you'll shed a bit more light on it later on. But it's how state schools manage that expectation of SATs and everyone involved with it, and how they kind of prepare the children or not prepare the children in some cases. But if you're kind of rocking into a class on day one, year 6 class, and the school's already going, right, SATs this, SATs that. That for me, that would be major concerns, because as you said and you alluded to straight away, it's about relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And the previous school that I stayed in for 10 years, I did the first 2 years in year 5 and then the next 8 years in year 6. And I felt the head and the deputy completely trusted what we were doing in year 6. So there was never a drive from them. They trusted their staff to kind of cover the syllabus that needed to be covered, to prepare the children for the SATs, not to kind of put too much pressure on the children. So I kind of went from that quite a relaxed kind of SATs atmosphere where there was a focus and we worked hard towards it, but it wasn't the be all and end all of year 6 life, to this other school where on that first day, kind of you're drumming it into the children, and it just didn't sit right with me at all.
So you obviously made the transition in that January, so January 2017, if my maths is right, to the independent. I keep calling it private, but we'll call it an independent school because that's what it is. And you're still there now, right? Yeah,
I'm still there now, but it wasn't a kind of conscious decision to move to an independent school. I had never applied for a job at an independent school. It had never really even crossed my mind. And the kind of, like you said, did I look for the job? Well, the job kind of found me, because if it hadn't been for my friend who works here, I would never have known about the job. It wasn't anything that had been on my radar. So yeah, it was never, oh, I need to go and see what it's like in an independent school.
So before we get into kind of the nitty gritty of the differences and what it's like on that side, and if you're listening to this and you work at a private school or independent school, I don't have any views on whether people should work there or not. Like, it's not the whole point of this podcast is to kind of share the experiences of someone who's done both. So it's not, there's no hidden agenda before people start going, oh well, he's saying this side and that side and all the rest of it. That's definitely not the case. We're just kind of learning from Jawad, who's been on both sides of it. So in terms of where you are now, what is your kind of, talk to us a little bit about your day-to-day job, talk to us about the kind of the setup of the school, really, because a lot of people won't know that there's kind of different elements to the school you work at, basically.
Yeah, so it's quite a unique school. We're a diamond school.
All right, don't show off.
Yeah, which means which means we the pupils are joined at nursery, mixed boys and girls,
Okay.
and then we separate in reception all the way up to year 11, and then our sixth form, the boys and girls, come back together, and we're across 3 different sites. So one site is the senior boys, so from year 7 to year 11. Another site is junior boys from reception to year 6. And then on my site, we have the joint nursery, and then girls all the way through from reception to year 11. And then our sixth form is on our site as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so I guess in terms of that, the transitions in theory should be absolutely seamless, right? If you're moving from foundation to to middle, and then middle to kind of senior, is it quite easy to run a transitions? And I suppose, obviously I know you're on 3 sites, but do you mix in terms of staff bases? So obviously, are you one big staff body, or is it quite clear that there's not a divide as in like a negative divide, but like, is it clear that you kind of run insets and staff meetings within each kind of pocket, I guess?
yeah, so inset days, we always come together at the beginning of the school year and at the end of the school year. Other inset days, it varies really. Sometimes we do stuff with the senior staff. Sometimes the junior girls and the junior boys staff come together as one. And I would say in my 6 years of being here, one of the biggest changes has been that kind of interaction between the sites has got better. And we were just told last week that from September, the junior girls, my team here, will be moving to the junior boys site. So there'll be a slight change, and that all the juniors are going to be on one site, which is a really exciting opportunity. We do have some staff that cross sites, so we have a few specialist teachers, our music teacher, language teachers. They teach the junior boys and the junior girls.
Okay, so there is there is an element of sharing some staff.
Yes,
and I guess really in terms of how that's managed, is there, obviously using your kind of early example of not having an opportunity to progress in terms of careers. You've been there for what, 6 years now, 6 and a bit years.
Yeah.
In that time that you've been kind of at your current school, would you say that there's been more opportunities available to you, whether you've taken them or not, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so the school has really evolved in those 6 years. When I first joined, it was quite a separate junior boys and junior girls team. So the junior boys had a head teacher, the junior girls had a head teacher, deputies on both sites. And then over the last few years, that's changed slightly. So our head at junior girls has taken on the role of junior head completely over both sites. And then the junior girls deputy has taken on the deputy role over both sites, overseeing curriculum matters. And then for me personally, there's been really good progression from joining as a class teacher, I think with responsibility for maths maybe to start with. And then...
How funny is it, by the way, that when you join a school, you just get lumped with, we've got a gap here, like you can crack on and do it.
Yeah,
and then you just forget where you started from.
I genuinely can't remember what I started as. So joined as a class teacher, I think maybe with responsibility for maths, or took that on in September. And then two years ago, got the role of assistant head.
Mhm.
And then because there was a slight change in the structure last year, I'm now deputy head for the junior girls site. So
Okay.
basically, there's quite a number of occasions where the head and deputy are both on the other site. So kind of the responsibility falls on me here. So from a personal point of view, the progression's been really, really good, and supportive and positive. Yeah.
And obviously, it's not as simplistic as, oh, here's a job and you go for it. Like, obviously, you're good at what you do. Like, you know, we've talked about it before, and we often have that joke about who works hardest. But like, you know, being the job that we do, and kind of the way that it works and stuff is, as anyone knows, you know, on SLT or even kind of middle leaders, it wherever you are, it's always going to be a demanding job, really. So in terms of your kind of deputy headship, what kind of how many classes are kind of you, I say responsible for, but kind of fall under your, you know, if you're head for the day or whatever, how many classes have you got kind of within the junior girls, and kind of in terms of the because you teach a class as well, right? Which I
I
think
teach
is
a
quite
class as well.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a really, really hard job. And I said to someone at our school the other week, you know, being a middle leader or being on an SLT and having a full time class responsibility is the hardest it gets. Like, it's the hardest for me I've ever worked, I think. Not that I don't work hard now. I do work hard, but you know, in terms of your day to day responsibilities and roles, just kind of talk us through those a little bit.
Yeah, so we are on the junior girls site. We're one form entry. However, this year we had enough to split year six. So we've actually got two year six classes for the first time ever, I think,
Okay.
on the girls site. So I've got one class, someone else has got the other class. So there's 8 classes in the junior girls. And in terms of my kind of role, so basically we have 5 1-hour lessons a day. So over the week, 25 hours, I'm in class for 13 hours, I think, and then out of class for 12.
Okay.
So
So kind of
that works
just
out really
about
well. And I think
50-50.
about 50-50. And when I went for the job last summer, one of the things that I didn't want to lose was that class responsibility. I think there might come a point in the future where I'm ready to step away from the class responsibility, but it wasn't quite at that moment. So kind of for me, if it had been out of class completely, I'm not sure I would have been happy to step away from that class responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it is a funny one. You know, I've kind of in my role a little bit similar to you. I was assistant head out of class, and then we had a bit of a shuffle around in terms of leadership. And you know, like you, I'm kind of deputy head now of our school. But you know, once you lose that, I said, is lose the right word? Probably not. But that kind of that day to day teaching, you know, going in and doing a little bit of leadership cover that I do every week, and kind of teaching a bit of PE here and there, it is so different to just having that kind of constant relationship with one class that's your responsibility and kind of your sort of domain, if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's funny how you know, once you step away from the class, kind of kids see you slightly differently. And you know, maybe that's just me, I don't know, but it's quite a big thing to go from teaching a class for sort of 13 years and then just going, right, I don't have to set up a classroom this September. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying, really.
Yeah, and with that, I guess in a state school, that would come under a job share, wouldn't it? Almost, because you're out of class half the time. But because we have quite a few specialist teachers here, actually, all the lessons that I don't teach are covered by specialist teachers. So we've got a specialist for science, for music, for art, for drama. So I'm still the kind of sole focus as a class teacher that parents contact, and the other lessons. So I basically teach English and maths, and then your kind of topic lessons, history, geography lessons.
Okay. I was going to ask you a really closed question in terms of yes or no answer, but we all know that that's a cop out in teaching. So I'm gonna save that for the end. So in terms of the way that you kind of you do your job now, and the kind of the expectations that are on you and everything else, just talk a little bit around kind of the assessment procedure or lack of assessment procedure, but also kind of the general, you know, if you were going to do a pitch for an independent school, kind of what would be the positives and what things would you say in terms of the differences between that and you know, what you understand to be state schools currently?
So 6 years, it feels like a longer period of time, to be honest with you.
Mm.
But I would say the biggest difference, and it's a really obvious one, is the class sizes.
Okay. How many have you got
I
in your class now?
So ours range. So our biggest class is 21 in year 4, which is kind of one over what we would normally offer. And then my class currently is 15.
15? Are you joking?
15. The smallest I've had, the biggest I've had is 21 as well. And then the smallest I had was a couple of years ago, maybe in the second kind of round of COVID, was 13. So the biggest difference is that. And having been here for 6 years now, I genuinely can't imagine going back into a class of 30. It kind of, like, I would obviously cope if I had to, but it is hard to imagine going back to that because of the kind of the attention you can give the 15 or the 16 children that you have in your class. And it's just like half the marking, basically, isn't it? That's the biggest workload for a teacher most of the time is marking. So I have half the marking that someone working in a state school has.
Okay.
So that I would say the class sizes are the most noticeable difference. I think we obviously aren't working towards SATs tests. We do INCAS tests at the start of the year, from year 1 upwards, up to year 6. The year 5 children do CATS tests just after Christmas, and then year 1 to year 6 do progress tests in English and progress tests in maths.
Okay. Would that be a kind of a state version of like, I'm not advertising for them at all, got no opinion on them, but Puma and Pyrrha style tests?
Probably similar, yeah. And it gives us a standardized score. Obviously, it lets us track the pupils through their time here with us. And it's not a perfect test, but we struggle to kind of find one that is perfect. I don't think anyone's ever happy with the assessments that they use, maybe. But yeah, so there's no working towards the test. There's no pressure on the children. Some of them in year 6 do the 11 plus because of the area that we're in, but they do that outside of school, and obviously isn't something that we teach to.
Do you, I mean, obviously having, prepared classes for SATs in the past, that they haven't really changed in the time that you've been teaching. They're still the same. The context of the questions has changed ever so slightly. But, do you find that, and I suppose this is a slightly simplistic question, because the children are not being prepared for a specific test, whether that's right or wrong is not up for debate at the moment. It's just the reality of the situation. Do you find that their behaviours change as a result? So if you think back to your kind of, your previous state school year 6 classes, around sort of, March, April time, it starts to get what we call crunch time, doesn't it? Do you find that, that there is a difference in behaviours? And I know we're talking about different areas in terms of where you worked, and we'll come on to kind of the, the outside expectations later on. But have you noticed that in your years of teaching?
So it's really hard actually to answer that properly, because I've only worked in mixed state schools, and now I have a girls' class. Generally, I would say in my 6 years here, the behaviour issues haven't ever been a problem for me. The girls are so well behaved, so respectful, and I think what not doing the SATs gives us is that freedom not to have to drop an art lesson to do an extra English lesson, or drop something that they enjoy. So the curriculum stays rounded for the whole year. And obviously, we all know that sometimes in some state schools, towards SATs times at March and April time, other subjects might get dropped in favour of an extra math lesson or an extra science lesson, or children are pulled out for booster groups. We don't really feel we have to do that here. So I'd say they still get the full curriculum, which obviously does help behaviour if it was an issue.
I mean, I guess going back to the very first thing you said to me when I asked you about your day about the Wizard of Oz, like there is absolutely no way, unless they are really, really chill about the whole thing, then again, this is symptom of a bigger problem. But there's absolutely no way that a state school would go, yeah, that's fine. You just crack on for a couple of weeks doing a mid-year production with a year 6 class. Like it just wouldn't happen, would it?
No,
It just wouldn't.
and we kind of, because we have to do a production on the girls' side and a production on the boys' side. The boys do it in May. So kind of we either do ours before Christmas or now, and before Christmas just never ever worked because of all the Christmas things that go on. So we kind of moved it about 3 or 4 years ago to now. But yeah, like you say, this half term we've obviously got the production this week, and then the year 6 also go on a PGL trip in a couple of weeks' time. And again, in a state school, March and April, that just wouldn't happen.
I mean, some state schools, they do all that with year 6 at the start of the year, don't they? Not necessarily productions, but I've heard of, the first week or 2 weeks or whatever going on residential to kind of, particularly if the class have mixed up, they kind of bond the classes together and stuff. But I think most people, tend to shift their residentials if they're doing them for year 6 towards the end of the academic year, don't they? Really. So the kind of picture that you're painting is that independent private schools are absolutely idyllic places to work, where you walk in every day and there's like freshly baked goods on your desk, and you've got 15 kids that are like amazingly well behaved and stuff like that. Is that the reality?
The reality here is generally it is that I can't kind of I enjoy coming into work every day. I have a bit of a commute. I live in Reading. I have about a 40-minute commute in the evenings, a little bit less in the mornings. And obviously in teaching, you don't have to have a commute. You can find a school close to you. I could find a school 2 minutes away from me. However, I think happiness in this job comes above anything else. So for me, the journey, the commute doesn't matter, because I come in every day. I work with really amazing people. We are such a close team. The girls in my class are brilliant. The parents are extremely supportive. So it is kind of a happy life. And I know that in other schools, in other independent schools, it's not always like that. And obviously in state schools, it's not always like that either. But from a personal point of view, I feel extremely lucky because I enjoy coming into work. I enjoy the people that I work with. I enjoy the children that I teach.
I mean, bit of context, Jared mentioned he lived in Reading, which is obviously the greatest place on earth to live, but he doesn't live a million miles from where I live. And actually, if we kind of drew a map of where he lives, I think probably the nearest school would probably be the school I currently work at, really.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit further out west of Reading. I don't know if, you're probably, if people are listening, they're probably not Googling the map of Reading, but I'm kind of further out west than he is, just a little bit. So I live far enough away for it to be local, but not too local, if that makes sense. So, if Jared was going to look at it, I mean, there's one almost opposite you, isn't there, on the other side of the road?
That's where my son
Where your
goes
kids
there.
go, yeah. Didn't choose us. Don't worry about it. Move on. But yeah, I mean, that is because I've done the journey pretty much. What you're describing, I worked in Bracknell, so I was commuting from sort of West Reading to Bracknell every day, and again, if you're familiar with geography, that should take you half an hour, 35 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Times it was taking me 2 hours, and I, as much as I love that school, it just killed me. Like it was just soul destroying. But it's really, really positive that you're saying, look, I love this job. I'm going to commute as long as it takes to get there. That's a real positive, sign of things, really.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm gonna play a little message from our sponsors, and then we're gonna come back and talk about some of the, not the negative stuff. That's not quite right. But the kind of challenges that independent schools and private schools face, and we're going to talk a little bit about the differences in workload as well. So stay tuned, and we will be back in just a few moments.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
Happy reading indeed. That was a message from John Cat, who very kindly sponsor our station currently. And if you're interested in any sponsorship at all, by all means get in touch with the radio station. The executive team are always looking to get new sponsors in, not to replace the ones we've got because they're fantastic as well, but just to generate a little bit more income so that we can carry on doing the fantastic things that we're all doing for the site. I say all of us, everyone else except me. I'm not going to sit here and go, yeah, everything's amazing for me, because, obviously that would be very, very crass, wouldn't it? Talking about amazing things. So you've kind of painted this picture that where you work currently is absolutely fantastic. You're loving it. What, a school is a school and kids are kids. And the challenges that you face are probably similar in terms of the pupils attending to kind of the same sort of stuff that that our kids would face in a slightly different economic environment, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be really specific with you and talk about safeguarding and kind of send workload. Do you find that there are still quite a high volume of those particular elements of school life? Is it the same? Is it less? Kind of, I know we're obviously going off on previous comparisons to where you've worked already, but what's your kind of general vibe with those things at your school currently?
I think our safeguarding culture here is as strong as I've seen in any previous schools that I've worked in, if not stronger, actually. We have regular safeguarding training, and it is kind of drilled into us that just because some of these children might be well off or have privileged backgrounds, it doesn't mean we don't have safeguarding issues. And that is drilled into us all the time. Just because we work where we work, it doesn't mean those issues aren't here. So from that point of view, it would be no different from other schools where, like I said, the culture is really good. We know we can talk to our DSL about anything if anything comes up, and they will respond appropriately and support us through it. Which again is another positive. And because we're on different sites, there's different DSLs on each site, but there's always somebody available.
I mean, big love for DSLs. If you're listening to this and you haven't checked in on your DSL recently, go and get them a croissant, go and get them a coffee, say how you're doing, because it's a lonely job sometimes. Let me tell you, especially if you work in some interesting areas. Put it that way. So I guess obviously the reporting would be the same.
Yeah.
We're not. I'm not going to kind of share specific details about the fees or the membership to the schools or whatever, because that's for people to go and find out themselves. But actually, do you find that the pressure's off from SATs? We'll talk a little bit about kind of external bodies effectively analysing or reviewing in terms of Ofsted what you guys do. But do you find that if people are paying X amount of term for their child to go, do you feel like you're more accountable to the parents than you were in, say, a state school?
Yeah, I would say 100% that is the case. But again, don't want to paint this rosy picture. In my time here, one of the things I've enjoyed is building those relationships with the parents as well, and kind of making them clear that this is a team effort, that we need your support at home with doing things at home with your children. So again, kind of the parental pressure is there, but sometimes it can be seen as a negative. But here, for me, it's not been a negative. It was one of the things that when I started here, people said, "Oh, you're going to have parents on you all of the time." But I think if you're open with them and you encourage their support and their input, you might have to give more time to meetings if there's SEN issues or anything like that. But that's part and parcel of the job. And like you say, they are paying their fees. But I can see how maybe in some other areas it can be quite a negative. I think the image of independent schools before I started anyway that I had was all the children are going to be well off. They're all going to come from really, really privileged backgrounds. That's just the way it is in independent schools. But actually coming here, I know of families that make quite big sacrifices to send their children here. They don't have nice cars. They don't have family holidays regularly because they haven't got that money. They choose to put their money into their child's education for one reason or another. So in that respect, it maybe is different to the picture I had in my head before I joined.
But I guess that comes from culture, right? Because, you know, my kind of slightly naive perception of it is that, you know, they're paying X amount, you know, as you say, they're sacrificing quite a lot, you know, financially and economically to be able to send their children to the school you work at. You know, my perception is always like, well, you're not measured by SATs, you're not measured by Ofsted, although we'll talk about that later on in terms of what that actually aligns to in independent sector. But like if a child is failing, in my head I've got these like horrendous images of like the parents banging down the door and going, it's basically your fault because they're not making enough progress or they're lacking in certain areas or whatever. And what you're saying is in your experience that's just not the case, is it?
No, not. Again, from my own personal point of view as the class teacher, that's not been the case. And then from a deputy's point of view, starting this September, again, that's not what I've seen. And some might question more, which is absolutely their choice. We're quite open with our curriculum and the things we do. We have workshops for parents every term. So, like I said, we work really hard at building those relationships with the parents. And I'm not sure how it works in state schools, but in the previous state schools I worked in, parents never had my email address, my work email address. It just wasn't something that the schools chose to do. So any communication went through the office and through us. However, in this school, the parents have our email addresses, so they can contact us, they can email us. And again, it's not been a problem at all. In fact, it's been quite a positive thing because it works both ways. I can email them if there's an issue, but they can also email me if there's any problems or any.
I mean, I read, I can't remember where it was, and if by some freak of nature the person who wrote it is listening, I do apologise because this was not, you know, it's nothing to do with me, but I read it somewhere. It might have been the iPaper, I don't know, but basically they were saying that there was a study on this school, and they were saying that since COVID, the parent engagement has really dropped off. Now, obviously, that could well be specific to the school that was being focused on, analysed. But do you overall, forget about the pandemic, just park that for a minute. Do you find that, do you get good buy-in, pardon the pun, with parents and carers at your school? Is it because you mentioned you have workshops, and I guess a lot of schools up and down the country have really thought about how they're going to engage parents, now in terms of how education looks kind of post-pandemic. But do you get a lot of buy-in from your parents in terms of engagement? Obviously you mentioned the show, we've referred back to the show, but kind of, are they fully invested? Again, pardon the pun, because we're not talking about money, but kind of the way they are with their children's education.
The parental workshops, again, having worked in previous schools and run them in previous schools, the turnout is never what you hope for, and here it's no different whatsoever. We did one recently, and it was offered to the boys and the girls' parents, so over 250 children on both sites, I think. And yeah, the turnout was really, really low. So
you weren't running it, were you?
Thing. Pardon?
You weren't running it, were you?
I wasn't running it. I was here, but I wasn't running it. Yeah, they saw my name and thought, nah, it's okay.
Leave it.
Yeah. So the turnout for that kind of thing is never great. For the shows and the productions, yeah, we get big crowds. We had a dance show in January actually, which was for the afternoon performance was reception to year 6, and then the evening performance was year 5 to year 10, I think it was. And for the afternoon one, we had over 200 parents in the hall, which was a really good turnout. And it literally to capacity. We couldn't have fitted anyone else in.
I mean, it's interesting because I read that article, and that's almost the complete opposite to what we're experiencing as a state school at the moment. I mean, I think probably we're offering a lot more than we did pre-pandemic or pre-COVID or pre-lockdown or whatever you want to call it. But we found that there's been a lot more buy-in from our parents. So it was just quite an interesting thing. I just thought actually I'd ask you that because you expect or again naively, I just expect that these parents are just drop of a hat and turn up and do whatever. But actually, they've all got jobs, they've all got careers,
Yeah,
same
yeah.
as any other parent or carer, I guess, really.
And I think there's a number of our pupils where both parents do work and do work quite long hours. So we have wraparound care from 7:30 until 6 o'clock, and there's pupils there every day where both parents. There's pupils there every day where both parents have to work. And the other thing that we do in Year 6 is in the summer term, we invite parents in to talk to the children about their careers or their career journey or anything. And we always get lots of parents offering to come in and do that. And it's been absolutely fascinating. And the children have really, really enjoyed it. So we've heard from all sorts of people, from all sorts of careers. So from that side of it, the parents are always willing to give up something as well.
I mean, I guess same with any school. The goal is really to kind of raise aspirations and go, look, this is what I do. I mean, I talked to someone the other day about it, and I said, look, she's, someone asked was a hairdresser, and I said, how cool would it be if health and safety permitting, but you could cut a member of staff's hair in front of them and go, this is how it happens, sort of thing. To give them that exposure would be like amazing, because they go, okay, well, that's an aspiration I could have. Or you get anyone in terms of these jobs that are so important to society in general. And kind of modeling that behavior. And I guess what you guys have, and again, this could be naive, it's kind of the word of the day for me at the moment. I've learned a new one, but I guess because of the economic background and the kind of the financial power that you need to attend your school, do you have a range of kind of parents that have aspirational careers or kind of a varied selection of careers in terms of what they do and how they present that to the kids?
Yeah, a really varied selection, and it's the ones that started off working in a fast food restaurant and have worked so hard to get to where they are. I think one of the messages I try to put across to the class sometimes is that their parents have put them in this position where they come to an independent school where there's small classes. I said, but they've all had to work hard to be able to have that opportunity. So when the parents come in and talk about their journey more than the job that they currently do, I think the girls always find that really, really fascinating, how much hard work has gone into establishing yourself in any industry. And one we had in last summer, who's actually the husband of somebody who works here. He works for Apple Music, and he spoke about within the music industry the number of different jobs you can do, and I don't think it's anything that maybe at this stage they would even start thinking about. But you could see someone thinking, "Oh, I never thought of that. I always thought if you work in the music industry, you've got to be a singer or whatever." So actually, it's just opening up that kind of that thought process. But above all else, like trying to establish in them how hard you have to work to kind of get somewhere, no matter what you want to do in life. It comes down to how hard.
I mean, I guess that is the key thing, isn't it? Because ultimately, the role of a teacher, whether you're in an independent or state school, or you work in nursery, or you work in sixth form or whatever, is always to be the best role model you can and kind of raise the aspirations of those children and give them the best possible chances, academically and to be blunt, socially, emotionally, and everything else that teachers do. So in that respect, I guess it becomes a bit of a moot point if we're talking about the kind of the similarities and differences between independent and state schools, because actually that is what a teacher is, right? Developing relationships with parents, developing relationships with children, giving them the best possible opportunity to flourish and be our school motto is be the best version, be the best that you can be, sort of thing. So that's really good to hear that you've got the kind of parental buy-in, you've got the kind of aspirations going for those girls as well. We touched on it a little bit earlier about, well, I touched on it a little bit about kind of Ofsted or the lack of Ofsted. Yeah. Are you monitored at all? Are you just kind of like, right, well, you start in September and we'll see you again next September and that's that? Like, because obviously one of the key things that's driving some teachers out of their profession is the pressure of Ofsted, and you guys don't have that, do you?
So we have ISI inspections.
Okay.
So done over a similar time frame. So we had one just after half term in October, maybe just before half term. I can't remember. So they come in we get a phone call on the Monday morning, and then they come on the Tuesday afternoon.
Wow, so it's almost the same time frame.
It's almost the same time frame. So we got a phone call on the Monday morning. We were told by SLT that it was happening, and then they arrive on the Tuesday afternoon. I think the Tuesday afternoon is more HR stuff.
Right. Okay.
And looking through the paperwork and stuff like that.
Single central record, all that sort of
yeah,
stuff.
all of that, all of that stuff. So that's a really busy day for the HR team. And then Wednesday and Thursday, they're in lessons. They're interviewing staff, dropping in. And I think because we were across 3 sites and we're a big school, I think we had about 12 inspectors, maybe.
Wow. How many pupils you got on roll?
Off the top of my head, I literally don't know.
Rubbish, absolute rubbish. All right, well, but it's going to be more than what, 300
across all 4 sites. It's going to be pushing 600 or 700, I think.
Wow. 12 inspectors.
So 12 inspectors, and they can drop in. So there are some allocated to nursery and juniors, and then the rest in senior school and the sixth form. So some teachers were observed 3 times, I think.
3 times?
Yeah.
The whole lesson, or just parts of it?
Parts of the lesson.
Okay, so you're not just going to sit there for the whole hour lesson,
not for the whole hour, no.
Right, okay.
I had the tough time of being observed in registration, which was kind of the easy again.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't observed teaching at all. Which you kind of, although it's good in a way, you kind of prep yourself up for it, and everything's prepared like really well. So you kind of felt a little bit flat afterwards that they hadn't come in.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And then they interview a selection of staff. So on the Monday when they phone up, they then have access to the staff list and the pupil list, and they will email out. We want to speak to these 4 staff about safeguarding, these 4 staff about curriculum. Some of it was just junior staff together. Some of it was across all 4 sites together. So I think staff went in groups of 4 to be interviewed, and then pupils from all age groups. They emailed us, said, well, we want to talk to these 4 pupils about pupil development, and these 4 pupils about this. So it was an intense 2.5 days.
Was that the first time you personally have had an ISI visit?
The first time, yeah. We have a compliance visit. So they basically come in, and they basically just have to tick boxes and say, yes, the school's compliant in this. No, the school's not compliant. So we did have that, but that's not a teaching and learning one. The full ISI inspection, that was the first one that I had experienced. Yeah. And
I say obviously, but there are teachers out there that have taught for 17 years and somehow always dodged the bullet.
Avoided Ofsted, yeah. No,
but you had Ofsted in your state school, right?
I had 2 Ofsteds in the first school that I taught in, yeah. And I have to say,
inspections, right?
2 full inspections, yeah. So this was the first one must be about 15 years ago, and then the other one probably 9 years ago, maybe. So maybe not as intense as they are now with deep dives and things. And my experience from the Ofsteds was it actually wasn't that much of a negative experience. The first one, I think I must have just been a class teacher, so maybe got observed. I can't even remember. But apart from that, kind of was untouched by it. And then the second one, I think I was Key Stage 2 leader or something. So I think 3 or 4 of us went in with one inspector. And because there's 3 or 4 of you in there, if someone doesn't know the answer or someone else just chips in. Yeah. So actually that safety in numbers was fine. And then I think from both inspections we got good, which was what the score was at the time, and that was fine for everybody really.
I mean, I guess, as with anything, it depends on the team, So
Yeah, absolutely.
with our school that I'm currently at, we were in special measures, the lowest that you could be. They kind of almost made like there were special measures, and then there was us below that sort of thing, and we had a fairly extensive monitoring process from Ofsted. And honestly, like I'm not going to name her, but I learned so much from that kind of our main Ofsted liaison during that time. And then, in the final, I say the final Ofsted, there's never a final Ofsted. It's not like, boss level or whatever. But, when she kind of said, look, we're going to turn it into a full section, whatever, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And gave us the good. Like, it was like, wow, okay. And it was so good to be part of that process with her, because she kind of understood the journey that we've been on. So yeah, obviously there are, as there are with any profession, there are some terrible Ofsted inspectors. There are some completely unreasonable Ofsted inspectors, but there are also some really good ones.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that, that I say good, that's not quite right. It's a different kind of pressure, I guess, isn't it, with you and the ISI? Which sounds like some sort of, militant political group, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds really serious. Like Ofsted's a bit not soft, but Ofsted versus ISI just sounds kind of really serious, doesn't it? Really scientific and methodical.
Yeah. So with the inspection, our biggest challenge as a school was because of the Equality Act, we choose to separate the children by gender. We're not a single-sex school. So we choose to separate. So over the last few years, there's been quite a lot of research into it. And basically, we have to show that what we offer the girls isn't different to what we offer the boys, and vice versa. Does that make sense? Because we are choosing to separate by a protected characteristic. We had to show that the offer was the same for boys and girls. And I think with certain things that is a challenge, because we choose to separate them because we maybe do things differently with the girls than we do with the boys, and vice versa. So from an inspection point of view, that is what we were building towards, this nil detriment.
Has that always been the case for your particular school, or is that kind of a new, initiative? It's not radical, is it? But was it always been the kind of the method of that school of choice?
Yeah. The diamond system has been, from September, the reception class that starts in September in juniors is going to be co-ed, and then that will go through then to that class. So by 2029, I think all of the juniors will be co-ed.
I mean, I guess when ISI are coming into your school, they've already done their research, like Ofsted do, and they already know that. But what did you feel like? And again, this might just be a really easy question for you, but did you feel that that you had to justify, or people had to justify, why you'd kind of split them into boys and girls?
Yeah. There had to be justification, and there had to be like a plan in place for the things that we knew were different. So, for example, on our site, we've got a food tech room, which the girls use. On the boys' side, there isn't a food tech room. So at the moment, the boys weren't getting to do the food tech that the girls were doing. So the school have a plan in place that from September, I think things will change. So we literally had to think really carefully about every aspect.
But in 2023, that could be quite a controversial
thing. Yeah, I agree.
In terms of everything that's going on and how, as you say, equality is moving, and rightly so is moving in a lot of areas that it should have been moving previously. To say that girls are going to do food tech, but boys, do
woodwork,
woodwork, whatever, right? That must have been a bit of a challenge to get around.
Yeah. So logistically, though, to have everybody use this food tech site, it takes transport to get from the boys' school to here. There was no scope, and basically what it comes down to is the school had plans in place to build a brand new campus,
right?
Which didn't get planning permission for one reason or another. So the whole thing with the inspection was, we know this and we try to do something about it, and we put all of our effort into this joint site, which would have been incredible. The campus looked absolutely amazing. However,
They
we
always do
can't
on
do
paper,
that.
don't they?
Pardon?
They always do on paper, don't they?
Yeah, always doing paper. Yeah, exactly. So from when it was rejected, the school then have to reevaluate. Right, how can we address these issues? So everything that the inspectors challenged us with, the school had already thought about.
I mean, it's such a, obviously from my point of view, I went to mixed schools all the way through, so state nursery, state primary, state secondary, and the school that I went to in Bracknell, so the other side of Reading in the county, really. The school at that time that I went to was just, that was horrendous. Like, people were actively moving out of the area to kind of get their kids out of the school, and it's completely different now. But personally, I loved it. I thought it was great. But all I've ever known is mixed, mixed sex schools. And I've worked with people that have come from solely single sex schools that have from an education point of view. I know, like my wife went to school in Reading, which was originally just a girls' school, and recently they've started to allow boys, and it was like this huge thing in the community where boys were suddenly welcomed into this kind of originally what was like a convent, basically. So it's quite interesting that and I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It's just quite interesting, the fact that in 2023, when we're trying to kind of bring people together and not have this kind of gender divide and everything else, that there are schools like yours that still choose to educate separately. So I guess really, like, is there opportunities for your pupils to kind of mix together? Is it like kind of this kind of horror story where you go, oh my goodness, you're going to go and see the boys or the girls today, and it's like it becomes a massive thing? Or is it
Massive thing.
Is it like regular occurrence in terms of mixing?
When I first started, probably not. Probably didn't mix anywhere near enough. However, with the head now being responsible for both sites, it makes a massive difference. So every other week we go to the boys' school for forest school sessions. So yeah, every other week they have 2 hours together with a forest school teacher. We've got amazing grounds over there. So that's been a huge positive in the last year and a half now. It started September 2021. And yeah, we love going over there. And they mix there. Most school trips we do boys and girls because our curriculum is now tied together. We go on school trips together. The residential trip that we're doing in a couple of weeks' time is boys and girls. So yeah, there's so much more. We do joint music concerts together as well.
Do you find that when that happens, when you put kind of boys and girls together, the behaviour changes either positively or negatively, or is it just kind of consistent because that's the kind of kids that you've got at your school?
From what we see at Forest School, we, again, only speaking from a year 6 point of view, because I've not been to the other sessions, there's never been a real issue with it, I wouldn't say. And when we first did it, it was like, I think the Forest School teacher used to say it was like a school disco with boys on one side and girls on the other side. So it was kind of a little bit awkward at first. But yeah, over time.
I just imagine it's like, like when you had discos as a kid and everyone was like standing on the wall and no one was like mingling or talking or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it kind of one of those environments where they're just like, I'm not going, or are they quite happy to kind of engage and respond appropriately and basically just kind of mingle?
Yeah, they're much happier now at doing that. At first, it was like that kind of divide where like, okay, who's going to talk first? But now, when they're asked to work in a group, they're asked to start a fire. They do work really, really well together, and they have that mutual respect, I would say.
So, I mean, side point: there is not enough people doing forest schools right now, and there's not enough funding. Like, that's honestly for me, forest schools. I worked in a school, and forest school was a massive part of what they did. What we did at the time, and it was just absolutely massive.
If I'm being honest, I wasn't the most kind of enthusiastic person when it first started. I'm not really an outdoorsy type of person and not one for mud and stuff. And actually,
You
over
surprised me,
time,
sir. You surprised me.
and over time, I've grown to really, really enjoy it, and the benefits of it from our school's personal point of view. The mixing of the boys and girls has been huge, and it is absolutely fantastic. But also the skills they learn, the leadership skills that I see some of the girls develop, has been unbelievable. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of it now.
I mean, you kind of touched upon it earlier, but just kind of circling back to that. Obviously, you've got the boys and the girls separately. Do you find that the girls under your care in your class, either across the school or ones that you teach directly, do they ever kind of ask you why they're separated from the boys, or is it like, again, really naive, but do you just kind of sit there at the start of the year and go, remember, we're separated because of X, Y, Z? Is it like really obvious why, or are there questions that come up every now and again as to why your school has chosen to separate boys and girls, and not so much from parents, because it's not like they do all this research, spend all this money, and they go, oh, you've split the boys and girls up. Like, they're going to know that, right? But from the pupils' point of view, do they ever ask you questions about it? And is it, what is the rationale for kind of separating them, basically?
The pupils have never once asked me
Okay.
why they're separate. It's never a thing. Like you said, it's something the parents buy into, so they know what they're getting before they do. One thing that has come up when it was announced last week about that the junior girls are moving to the junior boys site, there's obviously been kind of questions from some of the gals. Oh, how's this going to work? How's break times and lunch times going to work? So that's something as a school that we're going to have to manage really, really carefully, because break times and lunch times is going to be new for all of them, having to mix every day together. And
Yeah, sure.
the only experience that they've ever had of that was after the first lockdown. So after the May half term, year 6 and reception went back to school, but we went to the boys' site. We just opened one site, basically.
Okay.
And then by the end of the term, the rest of the year groups joined us. So we had all the boys and all the girls on that site that we're moving to. But obviously, they couldn't mix because of COVID. They couldn't really mix together because they had to be kept in their class bubbles, and they had to be 2 meters apart and everything. So they've kind of had an inkling of what life is going to be like. But yeah, that's something that we have carefully thought about, ready for September. They're basically going to have to be taught how to kind of coexist together, really.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's starting all over again, I guess, really. And kind of on that subject of boys and girls split and everything else. One of the things that drives me absolutely nuts in modern teaching is when people say they need good male role models.
Yeah.
And my response is always, no, they don't. They just need a good role model.
Good role model, yeah.
Do you find that, you being a male in what is essentially a female orientated environment with the pupils, do you find that attitudes towards you are different as a result of that, or is it the same, or do you know what I mean? Like, what's the kind of the vibe there, really?
I think from a parent point of view, because I've been teaching 17 years, but obviously I did 2 years in year 5 at the beginning of my career, and then since then it's been 15 consecutive years in year 6, which is quite unique, I would have thought, but that's the way it's been. But I've often heard from parents, because they often get to year 6 without having had a male teacher, so parents are usually extremely positive about it. And like you say, I've heard that before. They need a good male role model. I agree with you. It's about being a good role model, really. But maybe here, being on an all-girls site, they sometimes, I wouldn't say worry about coming into my class, but because I'm a male, got quite a loud voice maybe at times, there is almost not a fear, the girls can be a little bit worried about coming into my class because I'm a male and they haven't had that experience before. Once they get in, they're absolutely fine and they realise that I'm not the big bad wolf.
But that's the thing that used to drive me nuts. I've done my time in year 6, and particularly I found it more difficult lower down the school. When I was, in year 3 and 4, they go, I haven't had a male yet, and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
Like you can't. There's obviously things you can and can't say, and parents will come out with stuff. But I used to get quite offended. Is that the right word? I used to get quite upset about it because I was like, well, do they just assume that every bloke in their life, or every bloke they're going to come across, like you said, is going to be awful and shouty and aggressive and loud?
Yeah.
Like, is that what we're? Is that the kind of the current presentation of men in society? I don't know. I mean, we could obviously do a separate pod on that altogether, but it's very, very difficult when people say that, because I would say that needs to be challenged, because, as I said, they just need good role models. It doesn't matter whether they identify as males, females, whether they're gender neutral, whatever. The point is that these children in this current environment and the way the world is just need good role models that are going to go, this is what I expect of you, be really clear, but this is how we're going to kind of grow together, basically. I just thought I'd ask you that, because it's, I know we've talked about it away from this pod, but it's always an interesting one to bring it back to, in terms of that conversation about whether or not it makes a difference. And obviously it doesn't, because you're good at what you do. People you work with are good at what you do, so it doesn't matter if they're male or female, really. So that's positive to hear, really. Talking of role models, go on, mate. Sorry.
In the first school that I worked in, the head teacher was male, and we had 2 other male staff, so that was different. And then coming here on our site in our team until September, I was the only male member of staff.
Right. Okay.
So obviously all girls school and all female staff.
Tough.
It was, no, it wasn't tough. It wasn't tough. I've got 3 older sisters, so kind of,
You're fine with it then. Yeah, you're all good.
Yeah.
And a daughter and a wife, as well as a son.
And a wife as well as a son. Yeah.
Talking of role models, actually, I don't know if you've seen it yet. I know you're into your football, which we'll kind of come to in a minute, just to close out the show. But Mary Earps, who is, if you don't know football, she's the England goalkeeper, current number 1, plays for Manchester United. She was, played for Reading for a long period of time. She collected an award last night at was it the FIFA Awards? I can't remember what it was.
FIFA Awards, wasn't it? It's FIFA, yeah.
Right.
Like
yeah, so she won Player of the Year or Goalkeeper of the Year?
Goalkeeper of the Year, I think, yeah.
And she gave a speech. And if you haven't shown it, I mean, to anyone listening, whether you work in a private school, state school, girls' school, boys' school, whatever, it's well worth, sort of 4 or 5 minutes of your time, because she talks about being, individuals being enough for themselves, and that's all that matters. So it's well worth a watch. So if you've got sort of 5 minutes tomorrow, it's definitely worth doing that.
Yeah, I'll add it to my list of things to do.
It's just, the way that she kind of describes it, and that's, as I've said, that's what teaching is for me. That's kind of setting that example and trying to raise aspirations and opportunities for our pupils. It was just really, really good to see. She's great anyway. She's a fantastic goalkeeper, fantastic player, really good person as well. Often we get sports people that probably aren't the best role models, but she's absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, Mary Earps, best goalkeeper in the world. FIFA Pro Awards in Paris last night. Have a little Google of it and show it to class, because it was great. Really, really was great.
The other person. Sorry, this is completely going off on a tangent a little bit. The other person, speaking about inspirational speakers, the best person that I've managed to get into our school was Charlie Webster.
Goodness me, you are showing off now, aren't you?
Yeah, it is a show off, but it was literally by pure chance, and I was really fascinated by her story, especially when she went to the Olympics and contracted malaria and was really poorly and almost died, basically. So I don't know, like, something about her story just seemed really inspiring and amazing. So sent her a message on social media, and she got back to me, and she's she's come into school twice actually for 2 separate year groups, and she did a Google Meet with the girls during COVID times, and just hearing her story and having someone like that speak to the girls, and obviously she's had quite a tough upbringing. She did a documentary recently about child abuse when she was a teenager. Her athletics coach abused her and a group of girls. So there was a documentary on BBC that she did with a group of the girls. So she's had a really interesting life, but she was absolutely incredible. And getting someone like that into school to speak to the girls, I think is something that I won't ever forget, and it's something that the girls won't ever forget. And that was just pure kind of just chancing my luck really with getting her in. But having someone like that speak to the girls about the career they've had, about being the first football presenter in the Far East, I think it was, she said, about going in for interviews, about presenting boxing and being told you can't do that because you're a woman, it's not what women do, and then presenting at the Olympics on boxing with a big two fingers up to people that turned her down before.
Exactly.
And then
And that's, you know what, that's, I guess from your age group as well, like very, you know, as we all know, year 6 is very impressionable. They're getting to that point in their life where they're effectively choosing sort of paths, really, I guess. Having people like that to talk at an age appropriate level, because obviously some of the stuff she went through is horrendous, and that probably wouldn't be.
She touched on it in a really, really age appropriate way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, in terms of my teaching career, I've never had anyone speak like she did to the class and have everybody's attention. And it's brilliant to see she's gone on to do a couple of really successful posts and everything. So yeah, just...
No, it's good. It's all positive stuff. Just to kind of close out this portion of the show in terms of what we've been talking about, I'm going to ask you that closed question that I stopped myself from asking earlier on, and then I'm going to do that typical stats thing of you give me an answer and then I'm going to tell you why it's the answer, basically. Okay. So if you had the choice, would you go back to state education now? Yes or no?
No.
Well, you had to think about that, didn't you?
Because I was thinking, do you mean...
Because it's the key word. That's what I was going to say next. So yeah, tell us why.
Tell you what. So right now, where I'm teaching, where I am, the staff that I work with, the leadership team above me and around me, I have no reason to leave this school. From the first point of view. If there was ever a reason why I had to leave this school, and if my family moved away or whatever, the first jobs I would look for would be an independent school.
Right, you have basically answered that. That answer is so much better than the crass question I asked. So congratulations on that. That's exactly what I was looking for. I think it's really interesting for people to hear that though, because people I've worked with before have gone, yeah, I want to leave and all the rest of it, but they always go state school. I've heard of very, very few people that have gone from state to private. Do you know what I mean? Like we said right at the start of the show. So I think that's really, really, you know, what you've said. You know, obviously we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes or hour and 17 minutes actually. But I probably could have just asked you that question right at the start and we'd be done within 5 minutes. But yeah, look, it's a really, really good answer.
But I'm not naive enough to think that every independent school is going to be like the one that I work in now, as supportive. And I feel what we offer the girls, apart from the good academic stuff that we offer, our pastoral care, I can't imagine anywhere takes as much care of their pupils as we do, and I'm sure other schools do. But from my point of view, we couldn't do any more for the girls that come to our school every day.
And that again is kind of nail on the head. I knew there was a reason I got you on the show. You know, that's a really important thing, because actually it's down to culture, right?
Yeah.
So you could be, you know, working at a school that is in the most horrendous financial deficit, the worst economically deprived areas you can think of. But actually, if the culture at the school is right, then everything changes. You know, there's that book about the adult changes, everything changes. But like for me, in my experience, because I've been teaching, you 17 and a half, haven't you? So I've been doing 15 and a half. For me, it's culture. That's all it is. And it sounds so simple on paper, but actually, if you're at a school that goes, this is a direction, this is how we want people to be, this is what we expect of people, this is what we'll do for people, then you've pretty much got it nailed.
And I would say when I left the school that I was at for a long period of time, the culture there was no reason for me to leave. Again, the staff were brilliant. When the head teacher changed, maybe there was a shift in culture to trying to become an outstanding school. And I think maybe at times the hoops you have to jump through to get to that outstanding school maybe take away some of the things that you were doing really successfully before.
But I think a good leader always protects staff from those hoops.
Yeah.
It doesn't make those hoops the most important part of the school day, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So you're a deputy head. You have a class 50% of the time, as we established earlier on. You've got 2 young children. You have a big commute. You've got a lot going on. So away from teaching, how do you park that basically? How do you tap into the rest of life basically? What kind of stuff do you do?
I think with experience, you learn to prioritize the things that have to be done before the following week, maybe. So whereas when I was younger, maybe used to have to do quite a lot of work at the weekend, you kind of learn what stuff can be parked. Obviously, having a much smaller class helps with the marking load, for example. And then I think having a family, I leave the house at about 7 a.m. So maybe get a little bit of time with the kids before school, and then don't get home. It depends. Sometimes 5 o'clock, sometimes 6 o'clock. So don't get loads of time at the end of the day either. So the weekends are obviously focused around family time and trying not to do work. If I have to do any work, it's on a Sunday night once they're in bed. So from that side of it, kind of the focus has to be family time, really.
It's funny, isn't it? You could talk to lots of teachers of our kind of generation that have been doing it for 14, 15, 16 years, whatever. That sort of came through in the mid to late 2000s, and actually I was guilty in the first couple of years of basically spending all Sunday working and just getting stuff ready and mopping stuff up for the week. And actually, I'm not saying that kids, your own kids, the be all and end all, because they're really not, but at some point in your career, you go, hold on a minute, I'm not getting any extra money. And it's not about the money, obviously, but you're not getting any extra money for working on Sunday. It's probably not having any difference on what you do in the classroom at all.
No.
And also this kind of desire to teach the best lesson all the time, be in those days as it was with Ofsted, kind of an outstanding teacher and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't actually make any difference. No. No one's going to go on your headstone or write it down and go, there's an outstanding teacher. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that kind of shift is really, really interesting. So kind of away from the kids and the family time, how else do you relax? What do you do to go, yeah, I'm a teacher, but also I do this?
I try to run every weekend, Sunday morning normally, get out
Are you going out every weekend at the moment? It's too cold for me. How do you do it in this weather?
No, this Sunday was quite nice actually, just a basic run. And and I was planning on doing 5K. I managed to do 10K, and it was just because the weather was nice. And then obviously, as you know, I support QPR, which isn't enjoyable at the moment. It adds more stress to my life. But
right, how much does football affect your overall well-being? It's horrendous, isn't it?
So I would say when I first started teaching, it did affect me. And if QPR lost, for example, on a Monday, I would always wear a black shirt. So everybody knew on a Monday, if QPR lost, I'd be in a black shirt, and they knew to kind of tread carefully a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. How was your weekend? Don't ask.
Don't ask. You can see it's black shirt. But I would say, again, with children, obviously priorities in life do change. So if this bad run that QPR are on now had happened 10 years ago, I think it really, really would have brought me down, because you kind of live for that Saturday.
Yeah.
Because that is what you work towards. You work towards that weekend, going to football, going to all the away games pretty much. So that affected my happiness a lot more than it does now. And I think my son now comes with me to the home games, and it's just, we just have a good day, whatever the result. He's really good company. He really enjoys it. My mum and dad go as well. So it's kind of an excuse to see them at the football too. So kind of football is my form of escapism it used to add to the stress. I think now it is just a lovely day out with my son and my mum and dad.
I mean, I hate to admit it, but our clubs are very, very similar and have been on sort of interchanging trajectories, haven't they, over the last sort of 5-6 years? So, and I, my similar age, my son really, he's a little bit older potentially, but he started coming with me to football as well, and he absolutely loves it. And I think over the last few seasons, he's been the one who's kind of driving me on to still go. Not that you ever abandon your football team, obviously, but like, he having that kind of shared interest and it puts a different dynamic on it, really. And I guess, like, being really crude, it's kind of like a metaphor for teaching for me as well. Like, there's been times when I've gone, do you know what? I hate this. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. And I've realised actually it's to do with the school or the culture or whatever. It's never the kids, right? It's never the kids. It's to do with the way the school's set up. And so you move schools and you have a different perspective and you kind of enjoy it again. Yeah. Similar sort of thing, isn't it, really, in terms of always the children kind of grounding you in what you do and showing you a different way to do stuff. So yeah, that's really positive, really. Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, we are pretty much, I was going to go for the golden 1:30, but we think we're just about to be just over that, really. So we've kind of missed that target. As always, so good to talk to you, mate. Really, really good to kind of come on and talk shop with you about, education and teaching and kind of what you do, really. It's, you're doing a fantastic job, and kind of, I know personally how hard you're working, and obviously I had your colleague on a couple of weeks ago and how hard she's working as well.
Yeah. So she was brilliant. She's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really good. Great chat about PSHE. And if you've not listened to that, it's in the back library, I think.
It's available.
PSHE, so go and check that out if you want. Got some really good shows coming up this week. We've got a couple of sponsored shows, actually. Let me just have a look on the old agenda, using the power of multi-technology at the moment. What have we got? Yes, so we have got that's the wrong bit. It's all going so well until now. Hold on. I'm in the wrong bit on Slack. If anyone ever uses Slack, it's so good, but you have to be on the right channel to do it. So it's really, really positive. What we got? So a couple of weeks' time, Poppy Gibson has got Dr. Robert Morgan to talk about behaviourism. That should be good. Later on this week, we have got Tom Rogers. Or has he done that? It's got the wrong date on it. Don't know. But he was talking about teacher apprenticeships. And are they a good thing? We've got Nathan Ginn on. This one's going to be really interesting. I Predict a Riot. So if you're into music, you might know what that reference is. But it's called Crowd Control and Group De-Escalation in Schools. And there's also been a lot of stuff in the news at the moment, which we won't dive into with just a few seconds left of the show. But there's been a lot of stuff going on certainly with secondary schools across the country about sort of almost small-scale riots, really. So he'll be diving into that one. And then we've just got loads of good shows, really. It's kind of last week or the week before was a little bit quiet because it had been half term for some people, but it's kind of picking up again, really. So always something to listen to on Teachers Talk Radio. And as I said, if you ever miss any of these, you can always get them back from our Podbean account or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcast from. Jawad, thank you so much for coming on. Hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Good luck with the performance. Hope it goes well.
Yeah, it will be brilliant. The girls have worked so hard on it. So
you haven't got a walk-on role, have you?
Nope. I'm kind of moving the set around when it needs to be changed.
Is that because you're not trusted to like direct people and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I'm not good enough. Our music and drama teacher is much better than me. So
and they're worth their weight in gold, right? Any
they really are. They are. Yeah, it really is. Really, really is. Yeah, 100%.
Well, listen, enjoy it. Have a good rest of the week.
Yes.
Good luck at the weekend as well. Who are you playing on at the weekend?
Rotherham, big 6-pointer.
Oh, that's a massive one.
It's a big one. I know.
That is huge. We go to Middlesbrough away, so I think we're going to lose that one somehow.
That one.
Yeah. Have a good one. Thank you so much, mate. I will see you soon.
Yes.
And for my regulars, there's probably about 2 of them out there, but I will be back not next week, but the week after. Can't do next Tuesday, so I'm back in on the 14th, I believe. I've got my numbers right. Got a curriculum lead talking about maths and English in a state school. We're going to go back to state schools, but just talking about the demands and the expectations around that, really. So, yeah, Have a good week, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your working week. I don't think anyone else is on half term now. And it's nearly spring, nearly proper spring, hopefully, and the warm weather will come. Thanks for listening as always, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is